Holding on trades is kind of a low value proposition today. You have to have a stocking strategy or an inventory stocking philosophy.
Like if that's not your niche, then don't buy them. Why do we keep treating an acquisition lead like a sales lead?
If somebody's not doing what you ask them to do, they don't see value in it. If you're adverse to technology, then you need to get out the business because they're going to run you out. Because of where we are today, this is really important to share with your audience, Darrell.
Are you wasting your time and money on inefficiencies in the business? Are sales down and lead conversion rates are low? Are you having problems building or maintaining inventory levels? What does it really take to win in the automotive industry?
Get the cars that make sense for your store rather than just wishing at an auction. So it gives you that better control.
With over 25 years of experience, Darrell the Wolf Steed isn't just another industry voice. He's the guy who's out there solving real problems for dealers just like you.
They'll even say in the Pacific Northwest where you're at that it's a tougher market. It's, it's tougher to find cars. The market's a little bit softer. And in the midst of all this, your turn doubled and your profit's up 75%.
Yes.
The truth hurts only when it should. Are you ready to hear the truths? Darrell is here to unpack the hard truths and the proven strategies that will take your dealership from struggling to soaring. And he is taking it all in the streets, with real talk, open dialogue, unfiltered conversations. This is the podcast series, Street Smarts, powered by Smartwolf Consulting.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Street Smarts, powered by Smartwolf Consulting. I'm your host, Darrell Steed, and I am absolutely thrilled to have Benny Franklin join me today. Benny has over a decade of experience as a certified coach, speaker, trainer from the John Maxwell Team. My mission is to empower individuals, the organization, that's kind of what they go after, the personal and professional goals using proven principles, leaderships that John Maxwell has championed, which is one of the most recognized courses for coaching and development in the United States. Before embarking on this journey, as he's embarking on this journey, he works for Cox Automotive, Manager of the Enterprise Development Management Team with Instant Cash Offer. He has developed and boosted adaptations for retention, innovative platforms, worked with groups, people, teams. I personally have seen his ability as leadership and conversational skills in the time working with him. And in each episode of Street Smarts, we dive into real-world insights, practical advice that can help and navigate the complexities of both leadership, business development, and personal growth. So with having Benny Franklin on here, who we can obviously say is a certified professional in quite a few of these areas, it's a real treat for us to be able to dive in and get both the experience, the coaching, and the real-world application of this. So by all means, let's thank Benny for being here, and let's dive right in and get to the streets. Benny, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, and always look forward to learning some new insights from the man, the myth, the legend.
Thank you, Darrell. It's my honor and pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm excited and glad to see you. Glad to see I follow you quite a bit, and your growth has been impressive and incredible. People see your glory, but they don't know your story. I know your story. So I'm able to appreciate what you're doing right now on a high level.
Well, I really appreciate that. And let's start like we start every episode, because it's really important. I don't think anyone would disagree that, listen, we all work hard. The people I have come on here, if you guys haven't kind of got the tone, I've had one VP on this podcast. Everybody else are people in the streets, the people that are seeing it every day, that are living it every day. And what's really important is why they do it. Like we work hard, we do these things, but what are we doing and why do we do it? And so the first thing we always like to ask everybody is, where are you winning at? And then more importantly, tell us about how you're winning in life. And then what's your motivation for doing what you do?
Those are great questions. I can honestly say this, that one of my missions in life and as a leader is to make sure that my life works, especially today. And I can say that, I mean, you know this about me, maybe your audience doesn't know, but everything I live my life by are Christian principles. I'm a unapologetic Christian. And I live by those principles. So I can honestly say, as we say in Texas, since I found religion, my life works. And I started winning at that point. And so just having a roadmap to go by, a blueprint to operate by. I have 4 verticals in my life that are essentially my North Star, and that's maturity, decisiveness, consistency, and strength. Those are the 4 verticals in my life. That's the foundation of how I, manage my marriage, how I manage my business, how I manage myself, how I manage my team as a leader with Cox. And so I think that if we can focus as men or as leaders in general, we can focus on those particular things, then we'll pretty much be able to have a grasp on what direction we're going in, because that will always be our North Star.
No, I think that's great. And the 4 things you talked about, I think I got 3.5 of those. So I'll still
repeat it because I think it's important. Maturity,
right?
Decisiveness, consistency, and strength. Those are the 4 attributes that I think every man ought to seek after and go after and enhance in their life. Because if you can demonstrate that, I know women like those 4 attributes in a man. They like to see maturity, decisiveness, consistency, and strength. Your kids, any of your peers, anybody that's under your influence, they want you to demonstrate maturity, decisiveness, consistency, and strength.
Well, I think that's actually a great way to start this, right? Those 4 pillars, I think they work both life, business, everything. However, I think what we really want to take a moment here and talk about is when you look at that, whether you listen to Simon Sinek or you listen to some of these other leaders out there that have these big, huge platforms, let's just talk about that word leader, right? There's plenty of managers and there's coaches and there's mentors, but the word leader, I think, kind of is this different transcendent name that we like to kind of tell, or we like to use. It's like, oh, they're a leader. Are they? Because I think those 4 pillars are the definition, right, of how you start to become a leader. Is, do you exude those things? But more importantly, when people see you, you're a leader because there's, I don't want to say envy, but they want to emulate somebody that has these 4 strengths or that have these 4 things, and maybe other ones as well. To be a leader, you have to show people how to get those things. You have to be able to, 1, embody them, 2, show them. And the managers, right, if we're defining terms as managers, they might have some of them, they might have all of them, but they can't show it or they don't live it. And so I think that's that real definition is when we're leading people or we want to affect change you have to ask yourself do you have those core principles? Do you live them? Because that's embodiment of it. But then can you show people, guide people, talk to people on how to get there? Because not everybody is going to have that same path or understand what it takes. And I mean, I agree with you. I think those 4 things, if you focused on those 4, I can't imagine you're having many other difficult things that you're dealing with. That kind of will take care of itself in those 4 areas.
Yeah, it level sets you, keeps you on the right path. I call it my North Star. Those are those 4 pillars right there to help me understand when if I'm off track, and I always go by there. And I think leadership is the right thing. And I like to say that the word leadership is going out of style because they're trying to replace it with influencer. And I have my own theory on that. So my thesis is that no, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
Sure.
So, but if you just take the leadership off and call yourself an influencer, then what you rid yourself responsibility of is making sure that the people that are following you have the right blueprint. Yep. You're not just doing it for selfish reasons, just for clicks, so you can monetize the social media, and you create this fake life that you invest everything. You create this studio life that you really the principles of life only works within that studio, right? Once you take them outside of that, you're running into a lot of walls, and so I think that today more than ever we have to make the word leadership and bring it back in style, because it's trying to be replaced with influencer. And no, if you're an influencer, you really are a leader. So let's just make sure you're a leader. But a lot of people don't like the responsibility of being called a leader. I've even had somebody confront me with that and say, hey, no, I'm not a leader. I'm an influencer. No, hold on. It's not quite right, but I'll let you have that win.
It's funny that you say that, though, right? Just how you just said that, right? No, I'm an influence, not a leader. And that's an immediate pushback, right? The body language, everything else is. Because I think the real definition, when you actually said it like that, right? And no one has to agree with it, but when you say it like that, it kind of breaks down as an influencer is a leader without accountability,
Yeah.
right? Like, so you're influencing it, whether it's a movement, it's a whatever you're doing is. So you've gotten people, you've created noise, right? You've created noise, you've pointed it towards a subject, but now there's no accountability. Are you doing that? Do you believe in it? Are you then showing people how to get that? Because you've influenced an option, you've influenced a noise, you've influenced a dynamic. But if you then don't have the path or the understanding of how to help people get there, or now that you've created the intrigue or the education to it or the insight, like now they're going like, okay, now what do I do? Well, that's the difference, right? And influence is like, here's the shiny toy. And then you're like, okay, well, how do I do that? Like, oh, no, guys, I just tell you about it. I can't actually show you anything, right? It's the telling, not showing. And I think that's dangerous because leaders are the ones that live it, do it, and have no problem dealing with if it doesn't work or it takes longer, like there's some missteps or that like you trip a couple times because that's what it takes to grind through. So they don't have a problem accepting that, saying, hey, we're still moving forward. And influence goes like this. Hey guys, I told you all about it, but they can't actually guide me anywhere. Right. So I think that's really true. And Wayne, say if you're an influencer, you almost have to really decide, like, do you want to be that? Because you do kind of have a responsibility to society, that movement, that genre, whatever it may be you're in, to educate yourself on how to show people, teach people, lead, and actually lead. Not just creating the conversation is great. Love it. I want to hear it. I want to hear what people are doing. But we need the next part of it, right? You don't leave me on red and be like, okay, so I'm kind of interested in this, but now I have no idea what to do, right?
Yeah.
Now, knowing all that, what would you say? Like, I mean, you're in the automotive industry, you're in that coaching space and that certain and teaching space, but obviously you do work with the, that used car varietal from the vendor side. But I mean, you're in it. You see lots of dealers and lots of different unique things. What would you say the biggest challenge you see both in your career right now and in the industry?
Well, I think in the industry as a whole, in the automobile industry, we often run into these cycles, or I call them economical phenomenons, things that happen into the industry and out of nowhere, they're not normal, so they're phenomenons happening. And one of those the biggest one was COVID.
Sure.
COVID was a big economical phenomenon for a lot of reasons outside of the science and biology of the virus itself. But I'm just talking about its impact on our industry. Let's just keep it in that silo in the automobile industry. And as it relates here, so how does that affect used cars? Well, here's something a lot of people don't aware of, and part of my job, because I'm in inventory management solutions. That's what we talk about, as you know, is talking to dealers about options, how to bring in and get inventory and stock their cars, merchandising, and all of that. But I digress. But here's where we're feeling it right now because of this right here. During COVID, leasing shut down. Okay, so when leasing shut down for approximately 2 years. Okay, so the manufacturers stopped leasing. Now here's what a lot of people weren't aware of or didn't pay attention to or just didn't even realize it. Well, lease returns, and we've got to remember, we had been in a long cycle where the average trade cycle right now is about 3.5 years, maybe 4 years tops, but that's how the trade cycle is. The average lease was 39 months when you average them all out. So that generated a pipeline of pre-owned inventory. It was literally a pipeline of pre-owned inventory. But when leasing shut down for 2 years, guess what? When the trade cycle came back up, whether that's the lease maturity time or either the human nature trade cycle, when it came back up, guess what's missing? Those cars, which represents, by the way, 30% of the industry, of the inventory in the United States. So lease returns in general, everything associated with that represents approximately 30% of the used car market as far as vehicles available for purchase and resale. Right now, we have a number on what that number is. 2.8 million vehicles missing from the inventory right now. So that's created a huge vacuum for the dealers. There's not enough inventory, pre-owned inventory going around. So what happens when you need inventory? If you're a dealer, Darrell, when you need inventory, guess what? We need inventory on demand. Guess where you go? You go to the auction. When you need inventory on demand, you go to the auction. Well, the problem with that now, everybody needs inventory on demand. So they're all going to the same source, the auctions. And as a result of that, foot traffic's up, almost at pre-COVID peaks. But what's exceeded that exponentially is proxy bids. So proxy, you actually have more people bidding proxy than you do boots on the ground. And now it's almost leveling out. But why is that a problem? Well, now you have more people bidding on the same car that you're interested in. And so just that fact alone will increase the cost of that vehicle just because you have the same number of people bidding on the car. So the average cost to market right now at the auction is 98% cost to market. It's kind of hard to make money on a car when you have to pay, when you're at 98% cost to market, right? Because the market's efficient. It doesn't matter what you want to sell it for. It doesn't matter what you think it's worth. It doesn't matter what you think this vehicle ought to bring. The market's efficient. It's already set as far as what you can sell it for. And so, the old adage, you make your money when you buy the car. Well, if you're at 98% cost to market, you hadn't even touched recon, you hadn't even touched auction fees. Now you're just filling holes on the lot. And so now everybody's looking for these alternatives. So now the best alternative for buying cars on demand where you can make money are just going through private party listing services, reaching out to private party services in general, Facebook Marketplace, Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer, all of the sources that say, hey, we'll buy your car, and then inviting the public to that platform. That's a private party listing service. That's the only space now where you can buy cars where you can make money on them, because the cost of market on those cars per transaction is right at 90%. That's where you want to be at to be able to mark it up and have a good profitable return. Well, the problem with that is that cat's out the bag. If Darrell, I'm sure you noticed this. It doesn't matter anywhere in the United States. If you have a pre-owned lot, besides the dealer's sign advertising who they are in their name, guess what other sign you see? We buy cars.
We buy cars.
Yeah, we buy cars. So everybody's general understands that this is the best solution I have if I want to buy a car and make money on demand. If I want to buy a car on demand, not through the trade cycle. That's another portion there. That's another whole segment. But just right now, so dealers making that transition. The dealers don't typically adjust to change that quickly, right? They don't pivot that fast as a whole. And especially when it's married to technology like everything else is, there's always some lag. And now dealers are having to, one, come to grips with this is the reality. And number two, change their habit. And what's their habit? When they want to buy cars on the demand, the habit is to go to the auction. So just changing that habit up has created a huge opportunity. Now, so much, in fact, it's created a couple of business units. I know of at least 4 independents that have signed on and committed to just focusing on getting inventory from private party listing services and taking them to the sale, not retail. They don't retail at all. They're just straight wholesalers. So they redefine what a wholesaler is. And now they're just fishing the private party listing and taking them to the auction. Guess who they're selling to? The dealers. And they're making a killing. So now wholesale, they've redefined what a new era, a new age wholesaler looks like in this market today. I know that was a lot, but I get a little excited about that because that's a great question.
No, it's great. Here's the interesting thing, guys. So as he's talking about that, right, the lease return was easily probably the easiest one for people to understand because of the dynamics of it. And it's easy to relay, right? Like we didn't lease, that took out these cars. And what I thought was interesting that you said, I'm glad you put that number out there because I got that same study, but people see it and they just don't understand. When you say 30%, like guys, it wasn't like a 5%, like we're talking an absorbent amount of cars. Like this is a huge chunk. Like if I took 30% of your monthly income away, we're not talking about like, oh, we're surviving. No, we're talking like, oh, like crap. So when you think like that is like, that's one piece. Now, what I think is interesting, not as big as the lease return, but the other factor that people need to understand is, and COVID did do 2 things for us, right? It raised the prices on used cars that never happened before because used cars have never appreciated. They're a depreciative asset. Now they did, boom, we're good. But what dealers did, fine, they were greedy. They wanted to go after the money. Good for them. It doesn't matter what you think about that. It was a fact of life is that then they priced them over retail even when they inflated. So now you're like charging way up above here. What that ended up doing is, so when he talked about the 3 to 4 year trade cycle, that was your standard. Now we killed leases. So we've extended it at least by a year, if not 2. So now we're at 4 to 6 years. The other factor that really got us, because it made up for about 15 to 17% of the industry, was the people we sold used cars to that would have been in that trade cycle, right? That they just normally trade every 2 to 3 years. They can't, because now they're buried. They're upside down because the market did flatten back out, but they still owed so much on a car that they can't get out. Typically that we saw that happen around 3 years, they would get somewhere near even. Well, now because they paid so much, it's taking 4.5 to 5 years. So now on a 6-year loan, they actually have to go almost the whole term to get out of this car. When you take 30% out of leases and then another 15 to 17%, you're talking 50% of the inventory we anticipate vanished like overnight. And so where that becomes really interesting is like, okay, so now we have like, what do? We have to change what we're doing. And I'm glad you brought up the auction because, and this tells you how quick it is, guys. Him working for Cox, they are like the data kings. If there's data, they have it and lots of it. But what's interesting about when we're talking about the auction at 98%, like that's went up and down between 95 and 99%, like almost every other week. So when you look at it, it's like, even if you find a soft week, you're still at 95. Like you're like, I'm saving 3%. It's still not enough. And when he says we adapt slowly, which is going to be interesting because we're going to get into this a little bit more, is he's being extremely nice of adapting slowly in the auto industry. My first buy center that I opened myself before I became a trainer and did everything else, but when I was on the dealer side, was in 2010. When Trade-In Marketplace, so I'll age myself a little bit, came out, very first, like I might have been dealer number 7 on this tool. And at that point, it was like fishing with dynamite because no one had this, no one was doing it. You answered these leads and it was like people were coming in on the droves. I was like, why aren't people doing this? This is like magic. We're in 2024. We're 14 years later. And now buy center is like some kind of like hitch word. Like they're like, oh my gosh, I want a buy center. Well, one, let's just end the caveats here. Okay, let's end all the like misclaimers. So I have a slide, and I'll see if they can't drop it in. They'll just drop it in over my face as I'm talking, but it's the used car wheel. So people always use the word buy center. Guys, buy center is kind of like one of those hot words or those like, like AI or EVs that we just like, oh my gosh, as soon as we say it, it's like a buzzword. But a buy center is an encompassment of your acquisition strategy. You have your private party acquisition off the streets. Then you have your third-party lead aggregation. That'd be your instant cash offers, instant offers, things of that nature. Then you have your service drive. You have your customer base. You have the auction. You have rentals if you so choose, right? And then you also have your trade-ins because that is your acquisition wheel. This is where we get all our acquisition. Buy center gets coined as like, oh, buy center for private party. But really, when you think about it, it's an encompassment of everything. And what I think is interesting is everyone's like, oh, I got to do private party. Well, yeah, 14 years ago, I'll be 100% honest. It wasn't very hard for me to look like I was a genius because no one was doing it. Now, I'll be 100% honest. It's not that hard for me to look like a genius in what I build for stores because all the other stores, they attempt it or try it. My absolutely worst word in the world is try because I think it just builds in failure. And they do it for 3 or 4 months and they go, oh gosh, that's difficult. And so they give up. So when I build something, I'm like, guys, trust me, anyone that's doing it around us in 4 months, they're going to stop and then everything's going to get better because it's consistency and process. Or what he said about the 4 pillars, right? Decisiveness and strength, right? Same principles, right? Different word, but you have to be decisive. We're doing this. And you have to have strength because listen, it is not always going to be easy. There's going to take mental strength, grind, process, consistent. Like you're going to have it, right? And so what I think is interesting in the used cars, because you see it on the ICO and the inventory management solutions, because all of these things is how many dealers don't understand, like you have to have this well-rounded approach. A lot of people think like, oh, I think you should just buy from the street. No. I mean, yeah, if that drives more business to me, I mean, yes, you should just buy from the street, do that. But no, you have to have a piece of the auction. The only piece I think you probably don't need, or that'll be the last thing we talk about, is like rental fleets, like trying to buy rental cars, because there's some things that you would want to know about going after rentals. If you knew that, it might change how you go about it. But your trade-ins have to be locked in. Your service drive has to be locked in. Your private party has to be locked in. What I talk about a lot, instant cash offer, private party, things that is, what if auction was a piece of our strategy and not the bigger piece, like, or 70% of our strategy or 80% like most stores are doing? And what if the auction was something we could be proactive about rather than reactive and forced to do? And so what I'd love to hear from you, Benny, is like if they took a more proactive approach to private party, centralizing or universalizing their trade process, service drive, things of that nature, how does that help a dealer, or where do you think that helps a dealer in gaining that control back, right, in the used car department?
I think it's a little bit more, if you will, sophisticated than that, because when the internal process and the external process are two different strategy and actually two different value props. They really are. But just stay on to stay on course. Just talking about external acquisitions, or what I like to call, buying on demand. Right, when you want to get it, when you're getting it when you want it at that particular point. I think now that if you really want to make good decisions about it, you really have to understand and take a scientific approach to understanding what your inventory needs are. So when you go in now today, whether you're an independent, whether you are work for a small dealership, a big box store, whatever that is, you really have to have a good stocking strategy, or what I like to say is have a inventory stocking philosophy as far as your store is concerned. And then once you come up with that stocking strategy or that stocking philosophy, then you can build some strategy actions that you may call them processes or tactics, whatever, but they're actually essentially strategy actions based on what you identified as these are the inventory. This is the type of inventory that works for me and my store. And sometimes that puts you in a niche market. Sometimes it makes you understand it. And a lot of times it's either make model, it's either price point, high end. But today you really have to understand who you are and what you are, and then build your inventory around that and go after that type of inventory. So that's the next evolution for that. And dealers are becoming more and more adapt to it because they have software to help them remove themselves out of the way, take themselves out of the equation. You cannot be part of the calculus how you feel about something. You really do need to take a scientific approach about what's working, what's stocking well, and turning over well in your inventory as opposed to what you feel like. Because if you don't take that approach, then what you establish, or you begin to establish and have, and we all have, Darrell, I can guarantee you have this as well. You have inventory bias about some particular vehicles. When I was in retail, I had a couple of make models that I just had some biases about, just bad experiences for whatever. But I put a blanket approach on those cars, and if I did allow my guys to buy them, then they better had bought them way back of cost to market, right, back of book. If they were to, otherwise they had a hard rule: don't even buy that car. And so now we have the data to tell us, should I be buying that car? Forget how I feel about it. How does it really perform in my inventory? And so you have to really take another step up. And then dealers aren't, a lot of the dealers I deal with, at Cox, I deal primarily with what we call enterprise groups. So these are the big groups: AutoNations, Lithia, Cavender, all of the big box stores, Sonic, Lithia. I'm in these meetings, these think tanks, or the 20 groups, and we're discussing things like this. We're having conversations like we're having right now. And all of them want to get better. All of them have a propensity to adapt the scientific approach because the software lets you do it now. And the software is only getting more intelligent. AI is integrated in most of the inventory management tools now that gives us even more accurate data to help us, pay attention to what we should be doing. The problem is our nature as an old used car guy, and how I think things ought to be and how I want things ought to be and the reality of what things actually are. So it starts there. Now, once you get in the store, once your sales process and everything is in place, having a solid sales process to me is really simple. And all that means is that you have part of your steps to the sale, or part of your penciling strategy is with every pencil, there's a third party validation tool printed off with the pencil. And helping dealers develop that habit because because of where we are today, this is really important to share with your audience, Darrell. most customers have some point of reference to what the value of their car is by the time they hit the store. As a matter of fact, we have the numbers. They have 2.6 offers in their pocket before they get to your store. And that's because everybody's hunting for inventory right now. Everybody's hunting for these private party listings. So everywhere you look, as soon as you inquire one place about the value of your vehicle, then that cookie's going to track you, and it's going to speak to all these other bots. And guess what you're going to be getting? Invitations to do what? Get a value on your car. And you just stumbled into it. And so now when you're getting ready to, you've identified the car you want to buy, and you've got these numbers in your pocket, and you walk into the store, if the dealer hasn't translated a lot of old school traditional methods on how they work car deals to understanding that, holding on trades is kind of a low value proposition today. And I mean, hey, I was, there was something I did all the time. I held on trade. I wanted to get them to understand. But why it's a low value proposition today? Because it's a safe bet. It's a reliable bet. It's almost a no-brainer bet that they have some point of value, a point of reference to what the value of their vehicle is. So right out of the gate, to flush out what that is, and they're not going to tell you. A good consumer, smart consumer is not going to tell you what somebody said their trades were. They're going to let you present their offer and see what you offer them, because everybody wants more. It's not anything unusual. It's not anything menacing. You would do the same thing. So why we want to use a third-party validation tool with every pencil is to flush out the objection if there is one, and to be able to say, hey, that was Carfax, or that was KBB, that was Edmunds, that was whatever book you decide to use and print off, that was their number. We hadn't put our number on it yet, but guess what you have now? The desk has insight on what it's going to take to win the trade or complete the transaction, just by using a third-party validation tool. And that action alone, here's the end game. Here's the what's in it for the dealer, just by adapting to that. Their look-to-book is going to increase by a minimum of 5%, and their overall cost to market on the inventory is going to come down 2%. So there's a big win and a big carrot out there for just even adapting that into their internal process. Now, the service drive is something where that's you're not competing. You're competing with fewer people, so you ought to be fishing and minding your service drive. You really should be turning your service drive into a buying center, and just understanding. But there's strategy and tactics around how to do that as well, too. So everything has just gotten really more sophisticated. So you got to be really patient. You got to be open to perspective, to different perspectives on your approach to business. But more importantly, more than anything, Darrell, and I apologize, it took a long time to make that point.
Okay, man, this is great.
You have to have a stocking strategy or an inventory stocking philosophy. You have to identify that. You need to define that. Then that'll help you create some strategy actions on how to acquire that inventory. But until you understand that, you're going to have a lot of variables in your business. You're going to create a lot of variables in your business. You're going to have a lot of ups and downs. But if you can create that, the guys that are really successful in this business, they know that what their niche market is. They know if it's price point, they know that, hey, I only do well with cars $15,000 or less. Or if they decide they're going to be a luxury dealer, I only do well with $30,000 or $35,000 or $40,000 cars. But that's their market, and then it'll help them identify those strategy actions they need to make sure that they're stocking the right inventory. And so that's really important.
No, so I'm glad you actually spent a lot of time on that strategy, because, again, that's something I talk about. The dealer has to do it. I can't do it for them, right? But it is a big piece of conversation when I build any type of acquisition strategy for clients. Some of the other products that obviously I have now is you have that strategy. And I think, and the other thing you said, there was two things you said I want to obviously, one, repeat, and two, kind of have some dialogue about is, you said that you have to be open and it's more sophisticated. And why I think that's really powerful is, so you get your strategy action, and then dealers say, let's just use the $20,000 to $25,000 segment, retail. It is the most competitive segment in the United States. If you're trying to go get that and you think you're going to get it for 80% cost to market, good luck. And if you're somewhere getting that, don't tell anyone, because I promise you, it'll be over in a day. But you do that and you're like, okay, that's my niche. I know we crush it in that strategy. Where I think it's interesting that you say sophisticated is that now you need to understand is, well, they'll say, well, yeah, I crush it in that, but I only make $200 on the front end of those cars because to get those cars are more expensive. Yep, that is all true. The used car compression is worse than it's ever been in 50 years. And it's probably based on the analytics that I've studied, the analytics that have been shown, isn't going to get any better till the end of 2026. Because that's, again, shocker, what Benny said is when the lease funnel is going to start to open up. And then the trade cycle from the overpriced trades that we sold before will then start flowing back into the market. So that is our relief valve based on what the analytics say. When you say that, it's like, okay, if that's your niche, you have to be more sophisticated. And where that phrase comes in is you now need to understand, yeah, you may not make as much in the front, but then you have opportunities for back end profit. Then you have your fixed operations. So the more you do, there's profit margins that can be made here. It's just not where you normally would have lived. We lived in this front end profit margin. That's how we've operated. And then the back, but we never thought to like, oh, if we increase these other ones, this one could actually be less and then move volume or be in that niche. And then more importantly, the more you follow into that strategy or that you have that focus, now you have not less advertising, but more effective advertising because getting the right customers, it takes less to get them because you have the right inventory. And then more importantly, you drive in more trade traffic because, again, you have a niche of people coming in. So they're either wanting to upsell or downsell the vehicles they have. So there's all these little pillars, or we'll call it roots, that then stem from that strategy and action that I think people kind of fail to understand, that it's building the buying center or the acquisition strategy. Is just saying we're going to buy cars is not what it is. It is levels of both external and internal things that have to happen for this to be long-term. Now, if you say, hey, we're just going to go buy cars for 60 days, yeah, maybe there's not a lot of thought behind it in execution because you're just like, we need to stock up. But you're going to see that 60, 90 days from now when you have aging, or if you did things like you said, I think and I feel, and yeah, I do have preconceived issues to certain vehicles. There's two. Okay, the Jeep Gladiator. There's no chance anyone's going to.
Don't stop there. Don't name them off. Don't name them off.
Okay, that one, right? And the other one we'll leave alone. But and I think you're right. In every market, it's different. I've seen like the Gladiator in some markets flies off the shelves, and then others you're like it doesn't sell, right?
You have in your market. You
have to know what goes in your market.
It's just your own experience with that. That's why we have to have things to move us out of the way. One thing I will push back a little bit on that you said, Darrell, when a dealer should never reside on the fact that, hey, I'm not going, even though this is my niche market, I'm not going to make money on that particular car. This is why you have to have diversity and perspective. He just has to expand his sourcing out. That's part of the stocking strategy.
Yeah, no, you're saying expanding. What I was saying is that's the preconceived notion of dealers is like, well, if I'm there, like I'm not going to make money there. Well, that's not necessarily true, right? You have to understand what you're doing because you're only looking at it through a very narrow lens of what you thought.
Yeah, you only look at one source. You have to expand. Yeah. So more of a global search now is more important, and you have the ability to do it too.
Yeah,
because proxy is very sophisticated now. It's pretty reliable, not sophisticated, but proxy is reliable now.
Yeah,
because now the dealers are being held to the CR, right? So the CRs doesn't match up. You can take to arbitration. Nobody wants to go through that. So now the CRs are reliable. That's why proxy is increased exponentially because the condition reports are reliable. And so as long as you understand what you're supposed to be buying and then understand where to go get those cars, and you have to be a little bit more patient. And that's where the maturity in this industry comes from. Go back to our 4 pillars. Just understanding I have to be patient and I have to have a good plan about how I'm going to approach this so I can be consistent in my approach every single time, right? This is how I've decided this is my business model. This is what I do well at. That's the first thing. Identifying what is it that works for you. Sometimes we stumble into it. Sometimes we start off with this market and we end up over here in this market and we realize that's the market we're doing well. The thing you have to be cognitive of is just being aware that, hey, this is my market. And then you start studying that. That's where the sophistication comes in at, is that we have to have this awareness and we have to utilize technology to be able to help us do that. And the dealers that are, especially this is for independents, if you are adverse to technology, then you need to get out of business because they're going to run you out.
I agree. When we talk about, like, we'll use Viato as an example. They are probably the industry. They are the industry leader of the inventory management software.
They're the gold standard, as we like to say.
There's other ones out there, but we all know V Auto is the big dog out there. And oddly enough, and I'll tell a little story about this because it gives relevance. When I was at Mercedes-Benz of Fresno, we had V Auto, and this is 14 years ago, and like the strategies weren't nearly as good as they are now, but they were still like they were evolved, like they were starting them. And I get there, they have 30 certified cars. That's it. Just the trades they got. Mercedes, they didn't carry an off make ever. They wholesaled all those because they were like, that's not our niche. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't understand this. Like, why would you not sell other makes and models? You're just relying. Mercedes wasn't a big enough brand not to do other brands. So then we tried certain things. Like we said, okay, we're going to do Toyotas. We're going to do Honda. Like, because I didn't know what market they could do. All they had was 20 Mercedes on the lot. So what we ended up finding, bought cars, right? We had the acquisition side with ICO and the service drive, created that buy center. And then we got Toyotas, Hondas, Kias, I mean, everything. And we had a CarMax 200 yards literally across the street from us. So we would beat them too. What we ended up finding, we started getting trucks. We did really, really well with truck, like 30-day supply. Couldn't keep a truck in. They would come to the Mercedes store, Ford, ship. It didn't matter what it was. If it was a, F-150 to a 250 to a 2500, like these things just gone. So immediately I was like, okay, guys, the buying center still would buy everything because we would decide if that was wholesale or retail. So we had multiple strategies, understanding what we were good at. But then it was like, if it was a truck, oh no, we will step up on we already knew these were going to sell. So it allowed us to be much more surgical. So people said, well, how many did you carry? I was like, oddly enough, it was a 3-acre lot, guys. So in way of dealerships, this was a very tiny lot. We only had 55 cars that we could put on the front line. That's like as much as we could because we had to have some new cars. We had to give space to those new cars, right? Like I didn't like them, but they told us we had to have them there. So 55 cars. Yeah, we sold 160 cars a month in used. So that like kind of broke down that philosophy that V Auto also tells people of like, you don't need 400 cars to sell 400. I'm not going to lie and say it doesn't help. Right? If you have more inventory, you got more to look at, but you can be significantly more efficient if you understand the strategy, if you understand where you're getting it from, and then the delays of understanding what that is, because there are things that I think people don't understand. Like if you buy from the auction, I believe you should still use the auction in an acquisition strategy. I'm just more of a professed opinion of I don't want to be reliant on the auction. It's a piece of my strategy and I am not forced to live in it. But if I know it takes a week to get the car there, you're going to need to then identify what you're like. It's all those, like you said, the sophistication, the tools, the thing. Like, yes, if I buy a car that comes into my store or trade, I have it today. It's live. It's ready. It's gone. It's ready to go. If I have to wait a week, I also need to understand that too. Like, so I think what you said is like, if you don't embrace technology, the strategy, yeah, I would be the first person to say it's probably time for you to find something a little bit less pace for you, because I also don't like, I think the one that'll push you up, but too, I also don't think we'll call it the old school used car manager, the one that's like thoughts, feelings, bought the car on the book, held on trades, which yes, listen, when I got in the industry, that's 100% what we did. And it was effective until it wasn't. And then you needed validation. But it's also, I don't think the old school used car manager or that paradigm of what we thought it is, having a used car manager trying to do 8 different jobs in a store is no longer effective. Like you really have, because they need to zero in. It's like methodical. They need to do this. So like, you can't be like, he does the buying, the pricing, the stickers, through the recon. Like, no, they might make a little less money, but you need to have like people that are like folks so that you can be really surgical about what you're doing. Unless you're in a small store. Like if you're in a store that does 20 a month and that's what you do, that's a different animal. But if you're like, oh, we sell 150, 200 cars, and you're like, yeah, our used car manager does it all. Oh, I can almost but guarantee you, if you let someone look at it, you're probably losing deals and money left and right, just from places you don't understand.
Well, I'll tell you, and and I want to be careful here too, because the last thing I want to tell somebody is how to work a car deal. Okay?
Sure.
And I do that from experience because I resented when people would come in my store and tell me how to work my car deal. And when I'm successful at working my car deals, my gross was good and everything else. So I don't want to say that the reason why I preface it by saying it's a low value proposition holding on trade anymore, because it still works. Okay.
Yeah,
and so that's why dealers consistently do it, because you will still occasionally get some wins. But because of technology and that we can track that VIN now, we can actually come up with a report called a missed trades opportunity.
Yep.
And now we can show a dealer up to 90 days every trade that he looked at that ended up transacting someplace else. And that number has jumped quite a bit.
Sure.
And we'll present the reporting to the dealer, not to shove it in his face, but just to reevaluate that, hey, you might want to change your process. Just try to start using the third-party validation tool up front to flush that out to see if there's some money there. But without that, you are winning some of those trades and it is impacting your gross, but look how many deals you're losing. And so what the dealers never had was to see how many deals they're losing using that old tactic.
Yeah, the validation.
And so you can't say that the tactic doesn't work because they're still the reason why they keep doing it is because they're having success doing it. They're just not aware that the frequency of transactions have decreased and it's been gradual enough to not be on the radar until you can show them the reporting that, hey, we can track this VIN. And this is where you appraised it, 2 weeks ago, and it ended up in this dealer's inventory. And so we can get close enough to see what they ended up putting in the car. And the reason why they did it, and the customer didn't tell you that, hey, you're not giving me enough money for my car, I'm going over here. No, what the customers tell you, most of them are pretty polite. They just tell you, hey, let me sleep on it. Let me go talk to my wife. Because they already have a point of reference in what now you brought in another objection. And that objection, this is the hardest objection to overcome, Darrell. The objection that they just brought up was offense. Yep. Now you've offended the customer because they have 2 to 3 numbers in their pocket. Not even saying that the number's accurate or not. Most of the times it's not. But they have some point of reference that you hit them so low below that. And because trust is not a factor they walk into the door giving you, you've offended them and they've judged you as somebody trying to rip them off. And so they're not going to go off on you. Most people, I know the climate is confrontational now, but most people won't go off on you. They'll just simply go someplace else and do business.
Well, I think that's an interesting point.
So I want to be careful in saying it doesn't work, right? It's just a low value proposition today.
No, I think you're right by obviously, let's go back, guys. Not saying it doesn't work, but let's just explore that listen, you guys can blame me. Don't blame Benny because, listen, I'm okay with you guys not liking me because the truth hurts only when it should. So if this offends you, I promise you I struck a chord because you believe it to be a little bit of the truth. But when we say it doesn't work, when I say it doesn't work, is not saying when I say it doesn't, it is not a strategy you could put in place and do 100% of time with success. You will have more failures than you do succeeding. And so when we look at that is you really have to challenge the status quo. If you're holding on trades, you're doing that is this. If you put in that car, and a lot of people train this, a lot of people have these conversations, 20 groups and otherwise is, if you put it into Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer and CarMax and Carvana and pick 2 or 3 other ones, it doesn't much matter. And they can get these instant offers now in 30 seconds. And let's say, I believe the data as of like 3 months ago was about an $1,800 yield from like one system to another, depending on how they rep the car or how their analytics does it. Well, if you come back and let's say CarMax is 20, Carvana is 20,500, KBB ICO is 20,300, and then you come back at 15. One, we get into the offense issue. They already don't have trust for dealers, so now you've made it even worse. But more importantly is, would you take you seriously? Right? From the experience standpoint, if someone came to you, someone in the business, right? Because we always think like, well, I'm in the business. I know, right? We hear that all the time. If I showed you 15, how would you react? And why are you so much better than your customer, right? So it's really an experience thing. It's not that it doesn't work. Is you do have the analytics for validation, which I use that report every single day with every one of my clients. That missed trades and missed ICO report, like we don't have to have conversations. We don't have to have arguments. Like that is like, hey guys, like the data is there. Like we don't have to worry about this. But 2 is, guys, what kind of experience are you creating? Because we all know 2 things to be true in the auto industry, right? 1, there's not a movie ever made about the car industry that's going to show that we're good people, right? Every movie that's ever been made shows that car people, are essentially con artists and ripping you off, or we're painted in a bad light or untrustworthy, right? From car dogs to suckers to Cadillac Man to any of these. I think they're all hilarious. I love them all, but they do not paint the auto industry in a very great light. 2, the thing that we know is if you did a really good job, I mean, like red carpet rollout, you have to ask the customer to give you a review. You know what you don't have to ask them what to give you a review for? When you don't, because they will shout that from the rooftops on every portal. So when you think about experience, and when we're talking about trade cycles, acquisition, and being methodical about this, when you do something like that, you immediately have them leaving, because you're right. They are definitely not as antagonistic as it used to be and like losing their mind in the showroom. They'll just be like, okay, I get it. I understand. And then they find a polite way to leave. That it has changed that dynamic a little bit because people don't want that confrontation. But as soon as they leave, oh, they're telling everybody about it. So it's not only just the mistrade, it's that dynamic experience you're creating that they're going to tell everyone else about. So now you have to talk, like, then it gets into your advertising. How much more does it cost you now to retain or get a customer back, or get customers to come to you because you have people having trolls or negative intenders, like saying bad things about you, right? And in today's business, you have to have raving fans, because though we can't track it, right? Word of mouth. I won't say we can't. It's very difficult to track word of mouth and referral business. But we also know that that's still the most powerful piece, because people talk to people and they want to deal with the same, like they want the same experience. They want to know where they got taken care of. And they also want to know where they didn't get taken care of. And that's where I always focus on. We can be methodical and we can have processes and we can be real surgical about what we're doing, but we have to be conscious. And whether we adapt it or not, we have to at least be willing to acknowledge, like, if we create an experience that is untrustworthy, offensive, or we're not being transparent, because I think third-party validation, if you're not using it, I will echo Benny's point. You should probably find a different job. Why you wouldn't want third-party validation is beyond me. And I say it like this. Benny's a little bit more polished than me, and that's okay. Have you ever told a brand new mom their baby's ugly? No, you haven't, because you wouldn't be watching this podcast, because she would kill you, right? It's the same thing with a trade. Why would you want to be the first person to come out there and say you have an ugly baby? I'm going to let Kelly Blue Book or AccuTrade or any of these other tools be like, hey, by the way, this is what they thought it was worth. And when they don't like it, that's their number. Like, I'm going to let that be their number so we can have a real conversation of what I can do for you. Why I would want to be the first one in the room and jump on the grenade is beyond me. So when we think about that, is if you're not embracing those things, you almost need to ask yourself, why? What are you afraid of? That you maybe have to pay more than you would have? But if you make the car deal and you get a good trade, we're not talking the 250,000 mile bucket that like is definitely a car you're just sending to the scrapyard or the wholesale lot. We're talking like a true retail trade. Why? It's a car you're going to retail. Trades are hard enough to get. Why would you create that dynamic? You get into all these things. And so I really like focusing on the experiences. Like, if you provide an experience, and you guys can, we'll drop a link in this of, you can look at some of the buying centers, is getting that review and that testimonial and creating that experience is more important than anything else. Why? Well, because I can't lie about it. I can't manipulate around it. And you have to actually do what you say you're going to do. I can't sit there and say, we do this, and then not prove it. It has to be when they get there, that's what happens. And to Benny's point, everything that I build and do, I definitely use vAuto more than any other tool because almost everyone has it. But guys, what do you want to be in? Like, if you're like, I don't want to sell Lamborghinis and Ferraris, okay, let's not get those then. Like, if that's not your niche, then don't buy them. Now, if you're saying, I want to be in the $5,000 car market, okay, and that's your niche, okay, go after that. Or the 15 to 20,000, just keep in mind, like what Benny said, which I think we really want to make sure we at least say twice, you got to have patience. Because if you say you want to be in the $15 to $20,000 market, or the 20 to 25, which those would be the two most competitive right now, if you want to be profitable. Now, if you're just trying to get it to move units and you're a velocity dealer and you have different ways to make profit, I completely understand. But if you're like, I want to be, you have to be very patient about like understanding you can't just raise your hand. Like, you have to think about what you're doing. You have to plan for it. You can't just shoot from the hip anymore. You've got to use the analytics. You've got to use the strategies. And there's tools within all these, right? And software is great. Today's software is night and day from what Benny and I had 15, 20 years ago. But you also have to have a process that you follow, because the software is only going to show you. If you're like, I know it gives me all the data, and then you ignore all of it. Well, guys, like, if it gives it to you and then you just close your eyes, it doesn't work, right? So what I'd also like to know, Benny, when you're looking at this, when it comes to like when you're seeing dealers and everything else, how many dealers, when you're dealing with that, and like really embrace the, like, especially like when you're looking at like the KBB or that acquisition side of it, right? Is they embrace the, like having the customer involved in that walk around, like, so that it's a journey rather than them telling where they got to.
So I think everybody who does it appreciates it. I think
Mm-hmm.
you got to develop, like, you have to get the dealer to understand why it's important. We tell people when you're doing private party, when you're buying cars on demand through private party listing services, there are two things that are going to determine the success of it, and that's the strategy and tactics used getting people into the store, and the strategy and tactics used once the person is at the store. And so you're referring to once the person is at the
Yep,
store,
absolutely.
then you want to engage them in the walk around, because what you want to do is you want to more than likely the condition reports are not going to reconcile from what they originally did. So you need them there to help understand why the car is depreciating, and you don't want that to become. You need to let the software depreciate the car as opposed to the dealer. And so having the customer own the depreciating factors, then that's very helpful. So every successful acquisition dealer, a dealer that has success buying cars in this manner, they all engage in that practice, and they're pretty consistent with it, and they appreciate it. The dealers that struggle with it are they struggle with the gross amount that they need to be paying for the car. I will say this: most dealers do a pretty good job once the customer is in the store. It may not be, Darrell, your best practices. It may not be my best practices. But once a dealer gets a customer in their building, they do a pretty good job for the most part. I can tell you that. And you know this with Cox. I'm literally all over the United States. And once a dealer, and I can say this with everybody, once they're in the building, they do a pretty good job. It may not necessarily be the process that I wrote up for them, but they do a pretty good job. The heavy lifting is getting people into the building.
Absolutely.
But to stick to your question, do you have to make them appreciate why that's important to walk around with the customer? And then most of them, once you do that, I find that that's not as big a hurdle as the understanding what the process is that needs to happen, getting people into the building. That's the heavy lifting.
No, the reason I ask that is we always hear with change, right? And experience and doing that is like, it's hard, it's difficult, like it's tough. It's like, yeah, which, okay, if that's the excuse line we're going to go down, it's like, well, anything that's worth anything is never easy, right? So there's going to have to be some work. But I like hearing that, because you do travel around, right? I mean, I travel around pretty much the West Coast. I've now went to the East a couple times, but is when they say, well, it's hard, I'm like, well, guys, if I ask you to do something, I put a process in and it's simple, right? It's not something you're trying to make over convoluted. Is when you do it, it's what's in it for them, getting the customer. It's creating that experience. But I love you saying, like, once they do it, like they make that decision, they're going to do it. It's not as hard as they think it is. It's just the thought of actually like, oh, we have to commit to it, right? Because once you commit to it and say, hey, I'm going to put focus to it, you're going to get results. And I agree with you. Anyone that thinks like, oh, it's just so easy to get them here. Yeah, I would love to. I want to come see your store. If it's so easy to get them there, I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm on a plane. I want to come see it, because that is the hardest part. And I was actually talking to another gentleman, and we were talking about that, about like getting people to the store and what you do and what does that look like. And that whole experience is, and oddly enough, it was, it's the, how many times do sales, and I'll reference KBB ICO specifically because that's the Cox brand, but any of these third-party aggregators or private party, why do we keep treating an acquisition lead like a sales lead? It's not, right? But we put it in that funnel. We work it the same way we did. And then but then at the end of the month, we go like this, like, I'm surprised, right? Like, why didn't we get better? Like, well, because it's not a sales lead, right? And again, it comes down to that experience of, we typically, I'm not saying everyone, there are some really good stores, I've been in them, you've been in them, that like have embraced, like, it's a different or funnel, so to say, but it's, why are we pushing our agenda rather than figuring out what the customer needs, so that it becomes interactive, right? Rather than telling, it's more of a selling and showing. And so I'd love to hear what you see, and then like how you look at that.
Well, you covered, I think, if somebody's not doing what you ask them to do, they don't see value in it. And all you have to do, that's the easy, and the way I train my guys is if a dealer's not doing what you recommended, then they don't see value in it. So you got to take a step back before you judge their intellect or their work ethic or anything like that, and understand why don't they see value in it? How does it impact them financially? Because when you're talking and dealing with dealers, dealers primarily want to know three things: how much does it cost? Is it sustainable? And what's the ROI? What's the return on investment? So does it make money? Those are the three things. So everything you talk about has to touch those 3 points. How much does it cost? There has to be a cost factor there that's important to keep them, to even get them engaged. Does it make money? So you have to be able to point out ROI. And is it sustainable? Is it something that lasts? If I adapt to these best practices, if I jump through these hoops or whatever you're asking me to do, what kind of return am I getting? Is it making money? Will it last? And so if a dealer judges that what you're asking them to do is not any better than what they're already doing, you haven't demonstrated that, you haven't articulated that, because this goes more than just being passionate about making a statement. You have to really be able to draw it up on the chalkboard, right? You have to be able to do it in sign language. You have to be able to draw it up on a piece of paper or in the sand, right? But you have to be able to show them and understand what's important to them. So it's not a one size fit all in this business. In the automobile industry, it's amazing that even all of the big stores that they run a little differently, but they all make money. Even the small independent stores, it's kind of hard to tell a guy that's making, I'm just talking about even on let's take the smallest independent. It's kind of hard to tell that guy that's making 20 grand a month that he has a bad business practice. Now he's struggling and he's straining and his anxiety is killing him. He's aging quickly, right? He's aging like, he's aging really rapidly. But so it goes back to understanding what's important to people that are in this industry. How much does it cost? Is it sustainable? And does it make money? So.
Well, and I think
I would tell you that.
I think that's a great way to kind of tie everything in is like, right, you have to look at those 3 factors. But what I liked that you just said, which is kind of a great way to put a bow on everything, is the automotive industry is as similar as it is, and everywhere you go is there are so many different ways that they can create a business model that's effective. And, and all of them obviously have to focus on an experience for what works for their area, their region, their store. But there's no one way to do this. And I think the even more unique part of this, right, with used cars, because I deal with a lot with that, because if you're a new car franchise, new cars, let's get real. Everyone has the same exact car. It's just now you're just deciding the experience and the price. But in used cars is when it comes to acquisition, no one has to have this exact, like, I got to buy 50 or I got to buy 100 or I got to buy 200. Like, you can decide your business model and build it for what you're doing and be inherently successful. And I think why that's super important to wrap everything up for everyone is, guys, I have heard this through my whole career in the auto industry, and it's always drives me nuts, is that we hear these conversations in a store. Benny probably heard them too, is like, we're competing against the guy down the street. Why? Like, why are you competing against that guy down the street? Right? It's 1v1, right? It's me versus me. Like, if I have a business model that makes me money and is doing well, what do I care about what Joe Schmo is doing down the street? And I think that's the unique parts of the business is if you have a dynamic that works for you, takes care of your people, takes care of your customers, and makes you money, because you're right, if it doesn't make you money, we're probably not going to do it for very long, is what does it matter if, like, okay, if I sell 300 used cars a month and he sells 250, what does it matter? I get it. We want more of what he's doing, but if we have this sound business plan that we're convicted to and we're decisive about, if he's doing well and we're doing well, can't we just say, hey, we're both doing well. We both have business plans that work. It's always this, like, we've got to one up someone. And I think it's interesting because by saying that is, guys, you can have your own plan. You can put it into place. You have software. And if you don't have the software, you should definitely look at some type of software, because this is definitely math and science now. There is no thoughts and feelings in this business anymore for long-term strategy, but is that you can create your own success by using some tools, having some process and guidelines, whether it's if you have Cox Automotive products and they give you the basic understanding of what they can do for you, whether it's getting somebody like if you wanted web education with Street Smarts or you wanted me directly with Smartwolf, is you can build it any way you want. And if you want to be more profitable, you want to grow, That's just taking strategy. What is the strategy? As Benny said, saying this is what we're going to do, and then executing that strategy with a plan and a process so that you know, like, we're going to go after X, and this is when we'd like to do it, right? Because now you know exactly what you're doing. And then, you know, to kind of put a button on this, because his 4 pillars, right? You have to have the maturity to know that nothing's easy, right? And you're going to have to put in work. And if you think that it's just going to come to you, that we'll just leave you in that box by yourself. You have to be decisive, because at the end of the day, make a decision, do the decision, and own the decision. Because if you're thinking, feeling, possibly, maybe, like, you're leaving everyone else in an uncomfortable spot. You have to have that strength, because there's going to be days, there always is, that's going to challenge you, and you're going to say, are we really doing this? And you're just going to, you have to understand, you have to get to that. And the 4th one, okay, the 4th one was strength and consistency. Because at the end of the day, guys, and that's all I'm listening. You might as well call me a preacher of process and consistency. Because if you have a process and you're consistent, I have never seen anyone fail when they're like, they hold true to it. Because, and I'm glad we landed with that one of consistency is, can you imagine what your people that work for you think if you change things every month? How hard is it for them to shift on the fly? Hey, you change something on me every month. I love change. I live in it. It actually makes me even better. But not everybody dynamically learns like that, works like that. So when you do that, is what are you doing to your business? What are you doing to yourself when people don't feel sure-footed, right? Whether it's the 6 habits of people, how they react. If you listen to like Tony Robbins, if it's the way people interact, certainty is usually one of those things with everybody, whatever brand of education you've got, and consistency gives that. And so when you do that, that immediately creates a stronger foundation of, hey, this is what we do. And then obviously, if you need to adapt or you need to change something, you change it, and then you follow through with that decisiveness and maturity to do it. But I want to say thank you, Benny, because listen, I appreciate anyone that pushes back and gives a different insight, because listen, I look at a lot of things, see a lot of things, but people see different things. We have different walks of life, different thoughts, different processes. That's what also makes us better, is understanding different ways of doing things and accepting that, like, oh, wow, that's something I never would have thought of. But if it works, why would I not be open to it? Right. And it doesn't mean it works for you, but be open to seeing if it does. But I appreciate you coming on, Benny. I think you're an absolute scholar, professional of the absolute best in the business. And I wish you nothing but success. And again, thank you, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I appreciate it. And more success. And I can just see it right now. So